Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Beats, Brews, and Points of View podcast. I'm your host, Neil Richter, along with my partner in podcasting sitting next to me, E-Man Bates.
The PIP, that is me, and we are going from Plymouth City for episode, I'm pulling that up right now, I'm going to be honest with you, 132. There we go.
I couldn't remember either. Right when you started reading that, I was like, oh boy, I hope E-Man remembers, because I sure don't.
Episode 132. But yeah, we are live back from one of the cribs in Plymouth for a new episode of the BBPOV podcast.
Yeah, and that song that I started the podcast out with is a song called Misty Blue by Ashley Sorrell, Detroit's own, one of our favorites who you've heard on this podcast a few different times. And she released that song in perfect timing because she has this kind of like a blend between hip-hop and R&B thing going on. Where she's got that, like you heard in it, she can kind of sing like Erykah Badu with that neo-soul kind of vibe, but then she also has elements of hip-hop and kind of takes from like the Slum Village Jay Dilla kind of vibe to the production a lot of the times and stuff like that too. So, yeah, that's what that was for you there, and we have an episode kind of similar topically. This one is kind of something that E-Man brought up, and I'll kick it over him to kind of describe what it is before I give you guys a little bit of an intro here. So, E-Man, what was the topic that you wanted to talk about this evening?
So, when you think about R&B, right, rhythm and blues, I mean, what comes to mind to you personally, Neil?
For me personally, the Motown era. Personally,
I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, that's where I grew up on. Like when I think of R&B, I also think of like, you know, like the lovey-dovey, like romance, like courting somebody, things like that. However, there is a different side of R&B that's been getting popular. I mean, it's always been around, and we're gonna go into like a little bit of history with that today as well. But like the toxic R&B things that going on. What actually made me kind of bring this up was it's just like I've been listening recently today, and I feel like just in 2023, R&B has kind of taken a turn to where toxic R&B is almost the standard now these days. I mean, there's still stuff out there. There's like your what's the new guy, like Pink Sweats and stuff like that out there. They're still making like, you know, like the romantic R&B. But there's like, you know, we live in like a fuck him, fuck her, I'ma get mine, you know, like generation these days, where it's, you know, I feel like it's kind of affecting perception of like real relationships sometimes.
For sure.
For me, it's like it's a double-edged sword because I think about it in that terms, but at the same time, I feel like listening to toxic R&B is almost like thinking about like an episode of Jerry Springer or like a car crash. Like, yeah, it's bad, but you can't look away either because I mean, there's some good songs.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, they say like heartbreak, and they say all this. They makes great music.
Exactly,
it really does.
It really does.
There's a double side to that as well. And yeah, I kind of wanted to bring this topic up to light because I wanted to get more like opinion on it. So, you know, you guys in the comments and, you know, people listening at home or, you know, things like that. Like we can, you know, y'all can chime in and things like that. Whatever your whatever your opinion is. I mean, we'll bring it up next episode. And
definitely.
Yeah.
And before we deep dive into this, as we do on this podcast, as we get around to these brews, and for me personally these days, brews have been a little bit of a different thing because I'm trying to test it out. I've alluded to it a little bit on the podcast that I haven't really been drinking. And, you know, it's been now 10 weeks since I've had any alcohol, right? 10 weeks today, actually, which is kind of crazy. But, yeah, I'm going to see how long I can go. I like a challenge, and I've gone my entire adult life with drinking alcohol, so I'm going to see how long I can go without drinking alcohol. So instead of alcohol today, we've got a cannabis-infused iced tea, and I'll let E-Man tell you about it because he brought it to us.
So we're going to, you know, switch vices here. So I want to clear this up right now. Yeah, I'm absolutely proud of my PIP here for
thanks,
doing
bro.
that. Cause yeah, man, I know that's been a thing like he's been trying to do for a while, and I'm 100% supportive on his journey. However, me personally, I still like beer, so I'm going to drink beer on this podcast. However, I think what we want to do going forward, because the cannabis industry right now is absolutely at a peak for things like cannabis-infused drinks. I mean, there's a lot of different options out there these days. We are going to start including those into the show as well for sake, actually, too. So, because I feel like I know he's more comfortable with that. And yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
And yeah, and there's also, there's like a million different brew houses that make coffee in Detroit.
Coffee
there's
as
non-alcoholic beers that are popping up everywhere. So we'll definitely have some different things to try and talk about. So I think it'll still be great, and you guys will still get great episodes and a better version of me, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I really enjoy. Yeah, I really enjoy coffee as well, man. I feel like this is gonna be. I've already had this before. Well, actually, have I had this flavor yet?
Liquid Death, if you're listening, we sponsor us, bro. I love your shit right now.
But yeah, so over from Pleasantrees, they actually collabed with Blake's Hard Cider for these guys.
Which Pleasantrees is a dispensary out in Hamtramck by us.
No, it's a whole corporation, so there's different Pleasantrees.
Oh, is there different? I thought that was the start of
East
it.
Lansing has one.
Oh, shit, I didn't know that.
Mount Clemens has the Gibraltar Trade Center now. There's Lincoln Park has one. There's a bunch of different Pleasantrees.
Is Hamtramck the OG or is East Lansing?
What is? No, it's not. I don't think Hamtramck's the OG. In fact, Pleasantrees started. That's a good question. I'm gonna look that up. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry,
I don't
Didn't mean
think
to throw
that's
you
the OG one, but yeah, I know their facility is gonna be in Mount Clemens because they bought the Gibraltar Trade Center.
Yeah,
but yeah, they got like 5 or 6 different ones out there. Anyway,
Right.
yeah. So Pleasantrees combined with Blake's Hard Cider to do the Pleasanteas. They also have these drinks out called the ciders as well. Highly casual. They came out. We'll probably bring down a podcast at some point as well too. But yeah, they have 3 flavors out right now for the Pleasanteas. They have peach, lemon, and raspberry. I got the peach one in my hand right now. I believe Neil has lemon.
I have. Where is the?
It's a big ass thing that says lemon right there.
Where? Oh, yeah, I have the lemon.
Yeah, I'm excited to try it. It is 10 milligram THC tea. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's a pint size, so I got the 16 ounces going there. Looks like 0.43 milligrams of CBG, which is cool. If you guys aren't familiar with CBG, it is the first cannabinoid that's prominent in the plant. So it's really good for anti-inflammatory stuff, so like joint pain and digestive stuff. Yeah, man, I'm really excited to try this one.
Yeah, I just tried the lemon one. This tastes really good.
One of my biggest gripes with any cannabis-infused drink thing, though, and I get why they do it, mind you, is these, like, child-proof, like, things that go there. Because I'm like, every time I open it, I always get some kind of backsplash, no matter what.
I actually popped mine pretty good this time. Last time I struggled with it, but this one was a pretty good one.
Yeah, they got, like, a whole, like, security tape on it and everything like that.
They did a really good job with the flavor of this lemon one. It really actually tastes like some really good lemon brewed iced tea. It doesn't really have too much of an earthy like weed taste to it, like a lot of the edible products usually do sometimes. But yeah, this is pretty good.
Yeah, one thing I like about it, man. If Blake's is behind it, you're gonna get a good product. Which I don't know if they're listed anywhere on this can, but I do know that they actually did. Yeah. Okay, they're right here. Yeah, dude, it's solid.
Yeah, I like it. And I guess we'll see how it makes you feel throughout the course of this episode.
Hot 10 milligrams. Peach is cool, man. I mean, it's got that very peach fuzzy taste to it. I can't really describe peach. How's the lemon?
The lemon's good. It actually tastes just like some brewed tea that you would make at home.
I gotta be honest. I feel like it's just almost impossible to fuck up anything lemon.
It really is. I mean, that's a good point.
Any lemon drink, I feel like it's just hard to fuck up.
That is a good point. Yeah, that is true for sure. But anyways, before we get into this lengthy discussion, and bear with me here because I wanted to give you a little brief history to make this episode a little bit more valuable. And, we had talked about making it more educational. So that's kind of what I did here with what I wrote. So I wrote that I think that it would be important to teach a little brief history on R&B music to make for a better understanding here. So R&B stands for rhythm and blues, but it's deeper than that. That was the term that replaced race music in the 1940s as a generalized term for black music, but most specifically secular music. The term first appeared in commercial recordings in 1948 by RCA Records to describe black secular music on their label. This was also an interesting time in music because of black folks migrating to the Northeast and Midwest to seek out a better life. Well, with the Great Migration, there began to be a blend of music from different churches creating more markets of music. This ushered in boogie woogie, swing, jazz, and blues, all under the umbrella of R&B.
Boogie woogie.
Historically speaking, though, rhythm and blues, as we understand it today, most often describes a style of music that developed after World War II that combines elements of pop, gospel, blues, and jazz with a strong backbeat. The style would emerge in years following, would largely be played by small groups that made a focal point the rhythmic drive, more than the complex, big-sounding instrumental drives that swing and orchestral music had. The vocalists focused more on the emotional delivery in a direct way. This had a direct impact on music being made in the inner city, because now you had teenage vocal groups, later coined doo-wop, popping up that had little to no instruments backing them up, but rather different tones of voices lending as rhythm sections. The singing style, a lot of the time, leaned gospel, as a lot of these kids came from church backgrounds. The emergence of style would later birth rock and roll, but that's for a different episode. The music started to blow up post-war and in segregation. The social political landscape also shifted the narrative from just love songs to giving lyrical ammo to the youth and what they were writing and singing about. The labels also started seeing the success and having their white artists record black artists' music as a way to make it more palatable to white youth, i.e. Elvis Presley. We could do a whole other episode on how that model would affect popular music all the way up into the hip-hop we hear today, but that's not what this one is about. This, in turn, brought black and white youth together in a sense, out of love for the music and desire for change, because both black and white youth began blending together at live shows, and so those that pushed for segregation hated it and started calling it dangerous music to the youth. But this only made the youth rebel more, and it became more popular. So popular that it played a big part in the economy in our own backyard here in Detroit, as Motown Records opened its doors in 1959 by Mr. Berry Gordy. This quickly became one of the most successful black-owned businesses in the country and the most popular and influential independent record label in the country. But before I go off, let me pause. I could easily spend another 2 hours talking about Motown Records, but I repeat myself, that is not what this episode is about. But in that art form of R&B was born another one in the late 60s called soul music. Soul music leaned more heavily on gospel vocal styling with secular lyrics, impressive runs, and strong vocalists. While writing pretty love songs was always a driving factor behind R&B, the late 60s and early 70s would inspire a lot more protest and social political lyrics with the start of the Vietnam War and ending of the Jim Crow laws in the South. So R&B would go on developing new sounds like this throughout the 70s and the 80s, funk, rock, disco, and so on. There was emerging youth movements in various styles of art, underground culture, all over as well. But R&B as we know it sounds much different today than it did in its infancy. But this shift of the focus on the podcast is going to be about more so the last 30 years. The change in sound, both sonically and lyrically, from the late 80s and 90s with artists like Babyface, Teddy Riley, Boyz II Men, Mariah Carey, Toni Braxton, and Usher, to artists that we hear today like The Weeknd, Miguel, Frank Ocean, SZA, Ari Lennox, Brent Faiyaz, and so on. Somewhere in the 2000s, lyrics went from more about simping to toxic trait patterns, from I love you to I hate you, and we're here to discuss when and why. So just as I finish up here giving you a little background, I wanted to kick it over to E-Man on why you thought it would be a good topic for right now.
I just feel like the way things are right now in the world is we live in a fuck him, fuck her, like, society, I guess, in a way where I feel like toxic R&B is becoming a standard. Like, this gave the birth to, like, certain topics, certain actually... This is a whole Twitter thread. This is a whole, like, Reddit thread. This is, like, there's, like, different things that go on that I see personally to where I feel like it's just becoming standardized and natural. How am I trying to say this? Because I'm trying to say this in a way where...
Well, to give a good example for E-Man, right now, currently, the most popular song in the country is a song called Kill Bill by SZA, where the lyrics are, if I might kill my ex, might not be best idea. His new girlfriend's next. How'd I get here?
There's something you said in your speech I was thinking about too. I'm like, because you said in the 90s, like late 90s, early 2000s, that's when it was going on. Like, who do you think is the first? What was the first Toxic record you heard that you realized is Toxic? I guess in a way.
So in doing homework, it's actually prior to what I thought. So I was thinking it would be more in the era of, The Weeknd. The Weeknd was the first artist that came to mind when I thought about someone that was doing it.
He's definitely one of the biggest Toxic artists in the world.
Has come out and made a statement saying he's the one that ushered in, and no pun intended, Toxic RnB with Confessions. He said that his album was the start of Toxic RnB.
There's an argument for that. I mean, it's definitely probably one of the most popular Toxic albums ever made. It's probably one of the most popular albums made in general, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I there's a fight for that. But then I'm looking at, there is different ones. Like, we were looking at, if like that Michelle, I cannot pronounce his last name to save my life, man. I'm going to say Del Giocello.
There you go. I like it. That sounded legit.
Michelle Nijedcio. If that's your boyfriend, then he wasn't last night. And that came out in 1993. You got Amy Winehouse in 2006. You know I'm no good.
Yeah.
You got Escape. You're my little
I forgot Amy Winehouse definitely had a lot on hers for sure on the Back to Black album, big time.
I mean, I feel like it's just one of those things where there's a place for this. I'm not saying that all Toxic R&B is bad and shouldn't be listened to like that. Because, I mean, I definitely listen to it. Like, I love that SZA song. It's a very popular song. It's not even an issue, but like my whole take on it is that I feel like it's affecting a generation of people who it's affecting actual real relationships, I guess, in a way. Like, it's like that train wreck that you wanna look away from but can't, because it's just so like interesting, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. Well, no, I guess you could be. I think so. It depends on the listener. Definitely for a youth, when youth hear this in the lyrics, it definitely influences how you are, because I was definitely influenced in my early 20s by the music I was listening to, the stuff they were talking about, the things they were doing. So I think E-Man does have a point there for sure. And I think, yeah, like you said, we like watching a car crash in this country. We like watching shit that's more fucked up than positive. And, it's always kind of been that way.
That's what sells. And that's the thing about that. And it's always been like that, even if you think about it like the news, right? Mm-hmm. They have this thing where good news is no news.
Oh, yeah,
and
for sure.
Yeah, that's the mentality of, like, most reporting rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if something is good and positive and things like that, I mean, it might, they call it a fluff piece. It might be something, like, more like, they might report on it, but all the shit that's negative and toxic and all that, that's always going to get bumped up. Why not translate that over to music? Because it sells records. I mean, Confessions is probably one of the biggest selling albums of all time. Yeah. Right? I think I know it went diamond. Like, that's probably, it is up there. And to Usher's point, he absolutely has a point where I feel like that was around the time the change started, it kind of being more common. I mean, there's one-offs and stuff like that here and there. But then even in...
And there's always been fuck you songs. Even back to the Stevie Wonder, Smokey days, there's always been breakup records and You're Cheating on Me records and this and that. So it's always been there.
Yeah, to your point,
those were more album cuts. You know what I mean? Those weren't usually on the radio as much in the more doo-wop and early R&B days. But I thought... Go ahead.
No, man, to your point, and that's soul music. That's some real shit that's happened. Yep. I mean, that's some real shit that's happened. That's storytelling. That's an art form in itself to actually be able to project that. I'm saying that when is it too much? Yeah, that's my whole thing. When is it too much? When is it like actually starting to affect people in their everyday life?
I don't think it will ever. I mean, I don't think it's.
Oh no, bro.
I don't think there's ever going to be a time where it's...
There's a whole thing with, like, I guess Future's a rapper, but there's, like, a whole thing where, like, people talk about, like, I mean, the king of, like, Toxicity and shit like that, where there's, like, a whole group of people that, like, just say, like, fuck it. I mean, we call, like, the City Boys, City Girls. Not City Girls, the group, but, like, that's what they're called, like, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you mean? We call what?
Like when they say when something happens, like I don't know. I'm gonna just give like a random scenario. This is nobody in particular. This is just me spitballing on top of my head. Say for instance, a man was to he has like a steady relationship or something like that, but then somebody else comes into the picture and they hook up, and then you kind of get out of it, and then you get out of it in a way where it's like not get out of it, but you get out of a way where it's like kind of like manipulative and things like that. But then you kind of spin it. I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I'm confused.
My bad. I'm trying. I swear I got him. I'm bringing this home, guys. I'm trying to figure out what I want to say here. It's like when it gets twisted and manipulative and things like that, and you kind of blame it on the music, because I feel like people like get influenced by certain things, I guess, in a way.
I don't know. I think that's a stretch to say that you could blame your misgivings in a relationship on the music you're listening to. I think that's a stretch, but it's definitely more prevalent in the music that we hear now. And I think there's reasons why. And in doing homework for this, I want to give credit where credit's due. This masterclass.com had a pretty interesting take on it. And they said that basically they think that the more toxic trait patterns in R&B music came with the incorporation into hip-hop being pushed into the sound of the music sonically. So you started adding more hip-hop beats in it. And if we're being honest with ourselves, hip hop has been toxic as fuck since the jump.
It's super misogynistic.
It's super misogynistic, super toxic. There's always been toxic lyrics in hip hop. And so I thought it was a pretty interesting thing what they wrote down here. So they had like an R&B in the 60s was derivative around crooners like Etta James and Sam Cooke, brought smoother, kind of more like pop-centric things to the music. But in the 70s, the music kind of shifted and started to become more psychedelic rock was kind of introduced into the R&B sound, and you had more syncopated rhythms and Afrocentric lyrics. And then the 80s was more smooth R&B, and the R&B vocalists like Toni Braxton, Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, and all of that soulful singing with catchy melodies. And then present day R&B, the scene has changed from the 50s and 60s because there's more hip hop incorporated into the sound of the production of what they're doing there. And so they have down here, which I think is pretty cool because I didn't even know about this. They have 3 different characteristics of classic R&B. You have strongly overlapping with rock, guitar-based instrumentation, and then inspired from blues and church music. And then there's also 3 characteristics of contemporary R&B, which should be keyboard-based instrumentation, incorporation of hip-hop, and then smooth, minimalistic vocals. And so I think that's interesting because that definitely does play into the toxic patterns, and most notably because Drake, his first album was kind of a mix between hip-hop and melodic singing. And his lyrics have always touched on more toxic relationship traits.
Is that because it's more popular with the times, is what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
And that's what I'm saying. Like so this is how I'm bringing my earlier point back home. And I apologize for the wording. I'm trying to get my verbiage together and shit like that. So with the times being what they are now, and we have access to more shit and things like that, like say like memes, and say like, like we're in this culture to where people are saying, people are open to more like different ideas, different ideology, different like standards and stuff like that. And the music is getting more push pop. Like this type of music is getting more push and more things like that. I feel like people are almost like living the music these days in a certain way. I feel like there's a group of people out there. There's definitely like people out there that do that. I'm just saying, my whole point is, when is it like getting to the point to where it's not about the music anymore and it's actually like affecting the person?
I mean,
when it does affect
it's already there in a way, and I think that all caters to how the music is delivered to us, because now we live in a time where you don't need it's not the radio pushing the narratives anymore. It's not the labels pushing it's not the labels putting shit in the narratives. It's us. It's what we want to consume, because anyone can upload their music. So if someone wants to make a song saying I hate black people for 20 minutes and upload it to the internet, they could. And if a certain group of people like it, they can fucking adhere to it and keep that and get that shit popular. So you don't need the radio to push whatever kind of song you want to write. It just really whatever pops off and which catches wind from the people. And obviously we like these songs because they wouldn't be popular if they weren't, right? So I think that's kind of what it is. And then to go back to your point a little bit, there's always been the saying exists for a reason. Art imitates life, life imitates art. So there's always going to be that element to it as well. But I don't think that it would, I don't know.
When does it get too toxic is my point.
I think it gets too toxic when the toxicity trumps the art. So, and to give you an example of what I mean by that.
When people are living their music, when things like...
Well, what I mean by that is, so you have, for an example, you'd have that Christian rock and Blueface. We first got put onto Blueface for music, right? Obviously, I never really got into his music, but that's what we knew him from, right? It was his music.
Yeah,
but now... Everybody on the internet knows about him and his girlfriend way more so for their antics, beating on each other, all the domestic abuse, their toxic relationship. Everyone knows that way more than we know any of their music. Can you name a Blueface song? I certainly
Tatiana.
can.
That's literally the only one I've ever known. And to be honest with you, I don't even see anything with their relationship because I don't follow Blueface at all.
I don't follow either of them.
I don't
the way
follow
the Twitter algorithms be algorithming.
What are you following, the Shade Room? Like, what are you doing?
I don't follow any of that shit. It just gets put up on all the fucking social media shit, and you see it. So, back to what E-Man was saying about, it becoming this thing where we are living out the lyrics of music. I think that all definitely could be dangerous in the time that we see too much of the artists' lives with social media. Like, now it's more than just the music. You're seeing all of their lives and their personal lives being lived out on a screen.
I think it's what you make it. It's like how it's like how all this is said, like the social medias and things like that. If you think about like a Facebook or a Twitter or an Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, your algorithms are tailored towards you and what is fed, what the algorithms think that you're going to like. So you consume whatever you put out in a way. Mm-hmm. So if you consume toxicity, you're gonna live toxicity.
Oh, for sure. Oh, that's for sure. For sure.
That's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of subjective in a way.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to kind of word this for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's definitely what the energy you're taking in is the energy that you're going to put out. There's no way around that. I mean, there's obviously people that know how to carpet.
This shit is going. I mean, it's not going. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
My bad. I didn't mean to cut you off. But yeah, it's always going to sell. It's always going to be around, and there's always going to be consumers like myself. I'm still going to listen to it. I mean, I'm not. But at the same time, you got to look at it a certain way. It's just like the people that listen to it, because we live in a generation to where, and I'm talking about kids. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about us as adults. I'm not talking about like teenagers. Well, teenagers too, I guess. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about kids that actually listen to it and kind of take, the artist's word as bond.
For sure. Definitely.
And that's why this whole, and it's kind of why me personally, I mean, for multiple reasons, I'm kind of scared to bring kids in this world.
I hear you. Definitely.
Because of like, it's just like what we're kind of going into is like this type of stuff is being standard. And I don't want to sound like an old hater because I listen to this shit. But at the same time, I'm not going out doing any of this.
Right. Well, I mean, as an adult and as you grow older, and what he said is true, when you're a kid, you're a lot more impressionable. But as you get older, you got to learn to be able to compartmentalize these things and separate the art from real life. I mean, that's all of our jobs. That's like, and that's one thing that's bothered me about for the longest time. I hate when people say, rap lyrics are the cause of school shootings, or it's shit like that,
or like video games,
or video games, like exactly. No. Yeah. So like, you gotta be able to separate you know,
the art
and
the artist.
this craziness. But like there's artists that I think Kendrick did a great job on it on his new album with that We Cry Together. That is the most toxic song I've heard in a long time, but toxic on purpose because he was, you know, proving a point. Not that that's actually how he wants to be, but that's how some of these relationships are out there that we're seeing lived out on social media and in the web. And you know what? I think it's also the popular musician's job to give you balance, because I think someone like Drake, for example, that is as big as they come, already has the established fan base. So if Drake wanted to make an album about how he fell in love and the whole album is about being in love, he would fucking still sell like albums. You know, all of his fan base is still going to go fucking
do whatever the fuck
to get
he
it.
wants.
So like, it's definitely the artist's responsibility to show a different narrative as well. So if it's all you're putting out is these toxic songs,
that's what
that's a problem.
You get put in a box. I mean, think like, actually, we'll talk about a Drake affiliate. Let's talk about Party Next Door, for instance. Like
Party Next Door, Bryson Tiller.
Well, Bryson Tiller, Brent Faiyaz, things like that. Like, I was thinking about that. Remember, what was that Party Next Door song? It was a Savage Anthem that came out.
Oh my God, yeah. That song's crazy.
Yeah, that song is fucking nuts. Anyway, but I'm just using that as an example and things like that. Like people, like there's people that are kids that are young and impressionable and things like that, and will actually fucking listen to this and take that shit as bond.
Yeah.
And is that on the artist? And I think to your point, is it the artist's job to show like different sides? Should they be, you know, if this is their bag, like if this is their bread and butter, why the fuck should they do anything else?
Yeah.
Though? That's another thing, though.
I think they're
like
definitely.
If I'm the artist and I make music, but if all my music and my core fan base wants to hear me talk about just doing bitches dirty, why the fuck would I want to make anything else?
No, I hear you. There's that, but there's also, it depends on how you view your artistry as well. Like